Israel bombs the Iranian assembly that will choose a new supreme leader. Amid swathes of destruction across the Middle East, the markets are tumbling, and tonight Trump lashes out at Britain. Today in Iran, they are burying those killed in a primary school on Saturday as the death toll continues to rise. Good evening from Tel Aviv. As the war with Iran continues to widen, America's leaders might have struggled to say clearly why they started this war when they did and what their achievable aim is. But the conflict now has a momentum and consequences of its own. Israeli troops are back in southern Lebanon. Iranian drones are striking across the Gulf. Markets across the world are taking fright as oil and gas prices spike upwards. President Trump tonight tried to reassure the American people and the world, insisting he had not been led into war by the Israelis, but had instead forced their hand. And he is furious with Keir Starmer, saying he has ruined relationships with his attitude to Diego Garcia, what he called our stupid island.
This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
Also tonight, the UK sends counter-drone helicopters and a warship to Cyprus, HMS Dragon heading into the fray. As markets take fright over the war in the Middle East, Rachel Reeves tries to reassure in the spring statement that the government's economic policy is on track. And a British couple jailed by the Iranian regime and now trapped in the notorious Evin prison in Tehran. We speak to their family.
Well, let's begin with a look at the main developments here in the Middle East today. The US and Israel have kept up their assault on cities across Iran, flattening an assembly of experts building in the holy city of Qom, where senior clerics had reportedly gathered to choose a new supreme leader. They also bombed Iran's leadership complex in Tehran, which houses the presidential office and the Supreme National Security Council's headquarters, plus Mehrabad International Airport. Israel sent soldiers into southern Lebanon and launched more strikes targeting Hezbollah in Beirut, including its TV and radio stations. Iran continued to hit back, launching drones and ballistic missiles across Israel, but no major damage was reported today. Overnight, 2 Iranian drones targeted the US embassy in Saudi Arabia, causing a fire. And during the day, more Iranian drones and missiles were intercepted over Iraq, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar and the UAE, where debris caused a fire at the Fujairah oil industry zone. Well, the US has told its citizens to leave almost all Middle East countries immediately, as France announced it would deploy fighter jets to the UAE, and the UK announced it would send helicopters and HMS Dragon to the region. I'm joined by our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Secunda Kamani.
Well, Krishnan, the consensus has always been that President Trump likes short, sharp victories. This is not shaping up to be that. This is shaping up to be a deadly test of endurance. Who can cope with more pain, the embattled Iranian regime or the US, seeing the rise in fuel prices, seeing its soldiers and its allies attacked? And whilst we're still very much hearing from Iranians inside the country who are opposed to the regime and support military action to oust it, we're also increasingly seeing images that suggest there are substantial civilian casualties.
The man filming cheers on the huge explosions, apparently targeting a square in Tehran named after the Revolutionary Guard. Reviled by many. This afternoon, Israel hit a building of the senior governing body, the Assembly of Experts, purportedly in the process of electing a new supreme leader, though it's not clear how many were inside at the time. Hundreds of civilians are also being killed in these strikes. A mass funeral was held today for the victims of the deadliest attack. More than 150, mainly schoolgirls, reported killed in their classrooms on the first day of the war. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman addressed reporters from another school.
Were our children a threat to America's national security? And beyond that, what threat did Iran's nuclear or missile program pose to America?
The Iranian regime is trying to play upon the confused narratives emerging from Washington. And Iran is still firing missiles back. This the scene not far from Tel Aviv, though only minor injuries were reported. More damage is being done in the Gulf states. This a port in Oman, the country that had been mediating talks between Iran and the US. The American embassy in Riyadh also sustained damage in an Iranian drone strike. And here, another port in the UAE on fire. Oil and gas prices are soaring, all part of a deliberate Iranian strategy to raise the global cost of this conflict. Even Qatar, traditionally closer to Iran, sounds exasperated.
All the red lines have already been crossed. The attacks on our sovereignty are constant. When it comes to possible retaliation, as I said, all options are with our leadership. But we have to make it very clear that attacks like these will not go unanswered.
These images show the damage done to Saudi Arabia's largest oil refinery. The Gulf's carefully crafted image of stability is being shattered. And there are concerns about how long the state's air defences can hold out.
The problem isn't really if they can hold out for another 2 or 3 days. The problem is really if Iran can keep the current rate of fire going for weeks, if it came to it, then we're looking at a more problematic scenario, because there isn't just an order number that you can put in and then you get another stockpile of missiles coming in because they're being used in Israel, they're being used elsewhere.
Some reports suggest Arab states could now join the fight against Iran.
Does it seem to you this was a miscalculation by the Iranians to target the Gulf states?
The Iranians don't have a lot of choice. I mean, they needed to escalate and they needed to dictate the tempo of escalation as well, rather than being on the receiving end. I think Iran is miscalculating in terms of thinking that they can now pressure the Gulf states into becoming the pressure points on Trump, when in reality Trump's pressure point at the moment is really Israel.
President Trump may think Iran's pressure point is its western Kurdish-dominated region. Revolutionary Guard and police sites here have been repeatedly targeted in strikes. With speculation rebels across the border could enter the battle. Iran's regime struck one of their bases today, fearing just that. This conflict is spiraling in ways some warned, but many never truly expected.
And so Trump is now also trying to draw in the Kurds on his side.
Well, look, the speculation around American support for Iranian Kurdish rebel groups has been fueled by conversations President Trump has had with Iraqi Kurdish leaders. These rebel groups are in Iraqi Kurdistan. And as has been pointed out on numerous occasions in the past, it's very difficult for air power alone to topple a regime or at least even bring it to its knees. So it normally is done in conjunction with some kind of ground force. These Kurdish rebels could potentially be that, but they are much smaller than the forces of the Iranian regime. And don't forget that just recently, President Trump in America largely abandoned Kurdish rebels in Syria. So would these groups really trust that they could rely on that support in the long term?
Secunda Kamani. Matt.
Thanks, Chris. Well, after 2 newspaper interviews, President Trump has intensified his criticism of Sir Keir Starmer and the UK's approach to the military action in the Gulf. In the Oval Office with the visiting German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the President said of the UK, "This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with," attacking the government's handling of the Chagos Islands and its refusal to allow its use in attacks on Iran. He said he was not happy with the UK, which he condemned as very uncooperative. Well, our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is live in Westminster, and in a minute we'll hear from our Washington editor, Anushka Astana. But first, Gary, over to you.
One of the things that strikes you about this Donald Trump outburst is that he was answering a question, a general question about Europe. And he started by having a go at Spain, which is clearly his ultimate bogeyman in Europe at the moment. He doesn't like the way they've dealt with his war in Iran. He doesn't like the way they dealt with NATO. He was threatening to cut off trade with them. They're clearly right down the bottom of his affections right now. And then he segued into talking about Britain. The supreme partner, the special relationship partner. An absolutely extraordinary blast at Keir Starmer. Here's a flavour of the insults we heard.
Spain has been very, very uncooperative, and so has UK. Now, the second one is shocking, but this is not the age of Churchill. I will say the UK has been very, very uncooperative with that stupid island that they have, that they gave away and took a 100-year lease, having to do with perhaps indigenous people claiming the island that never even saw the island before. What's that all about? And they ruin relationships. It's a shame. For whatever reason, he made a lease of the island. Somebody came and took it away from him. And it's taken 3-4 days for us to work out where we can land there. It would have been much more convenient landing there as opposed to flying many extra hours. So we are very surprised. This is not Winston Churchill that we're dealing with.
Keir Starmer and Donald Trump spoke by phone at the weekend, one of them clearly now using a megaphone, and I think you can probably guess what the tone of that conversation was, and it probably explains why Keir Starmer went much further than he has done before. He knew there was going to be this incoming. He was trying to do a preemptive strike, as it were, yesterday, because in his much more lawyerly language, not the wild language of Donald Trump, he effectively said you can't win a war at 35,000 feet dropping bombs. You can't get regime change that way. And this is an illegal war, and President Trump doesn't have a plan for it. He'll now be wondering what that phrase you just heard, ruined relationship, really means. Does it mean anything? I understand from sources in Whitehall that intelligence, defence contacts with America, that important part of the relationship, carries on exactly as it did before. He'll be wondering as well whether the Chagos deal, we've said we won't actually fully sign off on the whole deal, leasing back Diego Garcia and the Chagos Islands from Mauritius. We won't sign off on it unless President Trump wants it. But does President Trump want it? This is one of many occasions when he's insulted the entire deal. We just don't know how long his concentration span on this is going to last. In other news, the government has decided to send a destroyer, HMS Dragon, as you were saying earlier, with some helicopters over to Cyprus to protect RAF Akrotiri. We know that 3 drones, probably fired off by Hezbollah, have gone towards the base there, one of them hitting, 2 of them not. And some people will be wondering, given the amount of time it's going to take that destroyer to get to Cyprus, what happens in the meanwhile?
Gary at Westminster, thanks very much indeed. Well, the Ministry of Defence tonight has confirmed that British jets have shot down Iranian drones. F-35 jets shot down drones over Jordan, and a Typhoon shot down an Iranian attack drone aimed at Qatar. The British drone also intercepted drones in Iraqi airspace. And a little bit later, we'll be talking to a government minister. But let's go to Krish in Israel. Krish.
Well, alongside his hard words for the UK, the president offered a bullish assessment of progress so far in Iran, saying the US has knocked out many Iranian naval and air targets and Iran was beaten militarily. But he said military operations were continuing and offered no time frame for the end of airstrikes. As it closed 2 embassies and told Americans to leave the Gulf, the stakes for the US continue to rise. Our US editor, Anushka Astana, is in Washington. Anushka.
Behind me in Congress, Donald Trump's opponents are desperately trying to force a vote to limit the president's powers when it comes to war. They're also pointing out what key figures in the administration have said about all of this in the past. The Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, in December, launching the defence strategy, said we will not be going after regime change. We will try to deter war. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, 10 days before the last election, said a war in Iran would be a huge distraction on resources. But some say to me that Donald Trump is the ultimate Iran hawk. I was actually watching him back in 1980 making the argument for military action. Again in 1987. Yes, he talks about peace, but listen to him. He always talks about peace through strength. This is a president who likes to show off America's military prowess. Why now? What persuaded Donald Trump that this was the moment for Operation Epic Fury? They told us regime change.
To the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand.
They told us nukes.
The president's been extremely clear about our objectives, and it's that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Now the latest claim that it was self-defense.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties.
Marco Rubio is not just the Secretary of State. He is Donald Trump's national security advisor. And when he briefed senior figures in Congress yesterday, he suggested to them that that third reason, that this is a preemptive defensive operation, was the key justification. Which is why Donald Trump was asked this morning, did Israel force your hand?
No, I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack if we didn't do it.
And while he said the US had decimated Iran militarily, he seemed to accept the regime might survive.
I guess the worst case would be we do this and then somebody takes over who's as bad as the previous person, right? That could happen.
On the question of motive, Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson left the Rubio briefing in no doubt.
The objective was not regime change. The objective was to take out those missiles, the short and mid-range missiles, and their ability to produce them.
But Democrats were not persuaded.
I found their answers completely and totally insufficient. In fact, at least to me, that briefing raised many more questions than it answered.
They said this was a war of choice, not need.
There was no imminent threat to the United States of America by the Iranians. There was a threat to Israel. But if we equate a threat to Israel as the equivalent of an imminent threat to the United States, then we are in uncharted territory.
Who do you think is in charge here, Donald Trump or Benjamin Netanyahu?
In the vicinity of Donald Trump, there is only one person in charge, and this is not Netanyahu.
But the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert argued to me that Netanyahu was highly influential
in convincing Trump to somewhat depart from the desire to become the king of peace, to now embark as the Lord of War.
Olmert said this operation had been a success so far, but feared a lack of plan, asking, what next?
Was there any end game thought in advance? Is there any plan?
The prospect of this spilling into a fuller conflict with boots on the ground like in Iraq could be disastrous, according to Olmert, who has faced decisions like these in the past. What could be that ramification?
I think that may be something that can shatter the basic foundations of the international geopolitical stability far beyond the Middle East.
They have no Navy, it's been knocked out. They have no Air Force, it's been knocked out.
In the White House, a fiery Trump said his strikes had already been devastating and would carry on. But with 6 US soldiers dead and skepticism about the real motive here, his opponents and voters are asking, is this really putting American lives first?
Well, General H.R. McMaster was National Security Advisor during President Trump's first term. He also served during the Gulf War and the Iraq War. I talked to him before the President's words about Britain tonight, and I asked him whether the President was right to start this war without congressional approval.
I think it was well within his Article 2 authorities. And I guess the question is, what should he have done to maybe bring the American people along with this decision to address, what has been a significant threat to the United States since 1979 and was a growing threat, which you're seeing play out, with these massive missile and drone attacks against now, 10 countries in the region. So I wish there had been more of an effort to prepare the American public and the Congress for this, whether or not he asked for a congressional authorization.
Now, in terms of the rationale for the actual strike, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has suggested that they had to strike when they did because they thought Israel was going to attack and that the United States would then be in turn attacked by Iran. Does that strike you as a logical sequence?
Kristen, I think that was just the proximate trigger, for initiating the action. The decision, I think, to undertake this sustained campaign was made months ago, and you saw that with the amassing of the troops there. Certainly, that decision was made after the mass murder of at least 30,000 Iranians at the hands of their government. So that decision was made. I think with President Trump, what you always see is a desire to get a deal. Like, he would prefer a deal. But you're dealing with the intransigence of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and the leaders of that regime were constrained by their ideology, which includes this permanent hostility to the U.S., Israel, their Arab neighbors, and the West.
What about the other implications of all this, though? I mean, because the other region that can't function right now is the Gulf. People can't travel, people can't do business. It's going to put people off going there. Inflation is going to go up. Oil prices are skyrocketing. Very good for Vladimir Putin, by the way. I mean, there are a lot of implications here that are not straightforward.
Yeah, Christian, I think in the long term, though, this is really bad news for Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Well, they were the protagonists. They saw themselves as driving change in 2023. Christian, I don't think that's the case in 2026, especially after the Venezuela operation. And now when you're seeing, that Iran the Iranian regime is in a state of collapse.
And how significant do you think the disagreement is with London? It's clear that the British Prime Minister disagrees with the idea that airstrikes can bring regime change and the legality of this action. Do you think it's significant? What would you be advising if you were still there?
What did international law do, to protect, the countless, victims of the Iranian regime over the last 47 years? What did international law do to protect, the 30,000 plus Iranians who were murdered in the last, 30 to 40 days? So I think that, that in this case, again, I would say that the rationale for this is geopolitical and strategic, but it's also humanitarian.
Just finally on the humanitarian point, because obviously other opponents of the war, point out that the United States is acting with Israel, and that when it comes to human rights and the mass killing of people, Israel's record in Gaza makes it very questionable for a vast amount of the world.
Hey, I would just ask a question. Why did Israel have to go back into Gaza, after it left in 2006 or whatever year it was, 2005? They had to go back in because Iran had supported the development of Hamas, an organization that once it got elected, then established a dictatorship in Gaza and was determined to use Gaza as a means to attack Israel and kill all the Jews. It all leads back to Iran. And that's why I think this is an operation to end a war rather than an operation to begin one.
H.R. McMaster, thank you very much indeed.
Christian, hey, what a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Well, I then spoke to Mohammad Marandi. He's a professor at Tehran University, a former advisor to Iran's nuclear negotiating team and close to the authorities there. I began by asking him how he thinks the Iranian military strategy is playing out.
It's working quite well. Iran is hammering the Israeli regime in retaliation for its atrocities and its unprovoked war, and it's hammering U.S. positions across the Persian Gulf region for its atrocities and the unprovoked war. And there's been no let-up in Iranian responses, and that is because Iranian missile and drone bases are all deep underground and inaccessible to the United States and the Israeli regime. And that's why they take revenge on ordinary Iranians. They've been bombing Tehran and other cities, destroying homes, destroying hospitals, destroying schools, slaughtering children.
It's clearly causing chaos in the Gulf states, particularly with the attacks on energy facilities. Is that part of the Iranian strategy to wage economic war as well?
No, Iran has not taken any responsibility for the strikes on the energy facilities, for example, in Saudi Arabia. when these Arab regimes in the Persian Gulf, when they give the United States military bases to use against Iran, then there are consequences. They cannot have their cake and eat it too.
Now, we understand that the Assembly of Experts is trying to appoint a new supreme leader. Could a new leader, do you think, negotiate with Trump and agree to his terms?
No. Iran is not interested in negotiating with Trump or the US regime. Iran is going to punish the United States, and we are in the process of doing it. This regime in Washington has tried to cross a bridge that's a bridge too far, and they're messing with the wrong country. We're not Venezuela, we're not Iraq, we're not Libya, we're not Afghanistan, and we're not Syria. This is the Islamic Republic of Iran, and we will make sure that the United States regrets the aggression against the Iranian people.
What percentage of Iran's missile stocks remain?
The vast majority.
Because after last year's war, it was estimated that Iran had used up around 40% of its missiles. Are you saying that was replenished in the last few months?
Those numbers were always fake. Those numbers are provided by the Israeli regime to the media in order to convince foolish Americans that war against Iran is simple. And if the United States escalates, that will mean that the most sensitive region in the world, the Persian Gulf, where a quarter of the world's energy comes from, everything could be destroyed. And if that happens, it doesn't even matter if the Strait of Hormuz is open or closed, because there will be no oil or gas, and there will be no tankers. For Iran, this is a fight for survival. For the United States, this is a war of choice.
Isn't the truth, though, that a lot of Iranian people want to see this government toppled? We saw tens of thousands taking to the streets just weeks ago, and many thousands of people were killed by the security forces. So public opinion is divided on this.
Don't believe your propaganda. That's silly.
Well,
I've already had an interview. Though the people who were killed, 3,117 people were killed. Hundreds were police officers and people who were patrolling the streets as volunteers, and hundreds of others were ordinary people that were murdered by these militants and these terrorists who were using weapons to kill.
We'll leave it there. Mohammed Marandi, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, Israel's action against Lebanon has continued from the air, with further strikes in Beirut and elsewhere. And on the ground, with Israeli ground troops pressing deeper into the south, despite Lebanese forces withdrawing from posts near the Israeli border and the country's cabinet outlawing Hezbollah's military activities. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Hezbollah was dragging Lebanon into war, pledging to step up attacks. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, is in Beirut. Lindsay.
Krishnan, both the President of Lebanon and the Prime Minister have spoken against Hezbollah, saying that all military activities by the paramilitary group are barred. But you know, just a couple of hours ago, the Israeli government said that Hezbollah was still firing projectiles across the border. I think that goes to show how weak the Lebanese government is. Now, also tonight, what we are seeing is that Lebanon is becoming an increasingly important front in this widening war. Israel says that it has assassinated at least one Iranian commander from the Al-Quds Force. The Al-Quds Force is part of the Revolutionary Guard. It says that it knows there are others who are here in Lebanon. They have 24 hours to leave, or they will meet a similar fate. Now, as for the Lebanese people, they're just collateral damage. Morning brought more Israeli attacks on Beirut's southern suburbs, where Hezbollah and their supporters live. The sound of small arms fire, and always the Israeli drone, the perpetual whine that brings death in its wake. Amongst the targets was Al-Manar, Hezbollah's TV station. During the last war in 2024, Israel weakened Hezbollah, which acts as Iran's proxy in Lebanon. Now it's trying to finish off Hezbollah once and for all. This is what Maria Khachab filmed this morning as she was leaving her home in the suburb of Dahia. I met her on Beirut's Corniche. She believes in mukawama, resistance.
I cannot accept anything, it's wrong. Israel came to take everything, and this would not happen because we believe in God, we believe in our martyrs, we believe in our mukawama. Our resistance is so strong.
A few families were camped out because it's too dangerous to stay in their homes in the southern suburbs, especially for a 2-month-old baby. They're well aware that this war spreading across the Middle East is part of a much larger American project.
I love the good Americans, but not what's happening now in the name of civilization and controlling all the wealth and the oil. Look what happened in Venezuela, and what's going to happen in Cuba. Now America wants to take Greenland. Why? What's going on? What is Trump doing? He's not a human being.
The Israeli Air Force flies over southern Lebanon. They bombed after Hezbollah fired across the border. The Lebanese government sees Hezbollah as a destabilizing force, provoking the ire of their powerful neighbor. This morning, Israeli troops crossed into Lebanon. Many here fear a new occupation. The Lebanese know that the Americans won't pressure Israel to pull back, that the displaced people of southern Lebanon are incidental, that their small country is a victim of far larger forces over which they have no control.
Well, I'm joined here in Tel Aviv by Asaf Cohen, the former head of the Iran desk in the Intelligence Directorate of the Israel Defense Forces. We've heard some extraordinary accounts of the extent of Israeli penetration ahead of the assassination of the Ayatollah. Just give me a sense of how extensive it is.
So, you know, we've been working on the penetration to the Iranian organization for the last 15 years or so, since we actually understood that we will need to encounter with the Iranian other organization, the IRGC and the others. So it's about building layers, and we have been building layers of intelligence, by the way, with our partners throughout the world. So we will be able to go and do whatever we need in order to cope with all of the problems that Iran caused Israel and other countries throughout the world, in order to be able to actually maneuver in any place at any time. And, you know, we saw that actually it was worthwhile.
Yes, now we heard the Iranian assessment of their military strategy. I mean, give me a sense of what you think is going on with the way they are attacking targets in the Gulf. And is it possible to underestimate what Iran can achieve?
So I see Iran at the moment as a gambler on the roulette table that actually puts all in. Actually, Iran says, I said it's going to be through a regional war, and I'm giving you a regional war. Everyone is involved. All the American entities in the Middle East is a part of it, and I'm going to involve everybody. I don't have anything to lose at the moment.
And is this the regional war that the Ayatollah had planned out before?
Exactly. Yes. Actually, the Iranian wants all the Arab countries to go to President Trump and say, hey, we've been shot. We have problems. Stop the war. They want the price of oil to get high because President Trump is very, very much involved with it. They want all of it to happen. They don't want no ships with oil to go in the Hormuz tunnel. All of that, they know that they are not able to cope with the American strength, the American firepower. But they know that they have all the others, and they try to do it in a different way. I'm not sure the gamble is going to be sufficient for them, but they're gambling all the way.
And it can cause a lot of havoc along the way.
Yeah, you're right about it. It's a survival, because they understand that it's either they cope with it and survive, or it's the end of their regime, actually.
Now, in terms of who is actually controlling things now, I mean, is it absolutely clear to you? I mean, we've been getting some mixed messages, well, from both sides, frankly, but we have also had mixed messages from Iran.
Yeah, exactly. I think that it's actually been a division between the council, heading by the president, that was established according to the law. Ali Larijani, or the Larijani family actually, that controlled quite a lot of assets in Iran and got some of the approval of Khamenei, the deceased Khamenei, to control some of Iran. And we have the IRGC that control the military array, the security array. And all one of them actually is taking to different direction, and we see the clashes. We see a lack of real leadership. Maybe they are expecting a leader to be appointed, and then someone actually will be able to take everything together. I'm not sure that actually not aiming to stay in the same position, you know, and the one that have the most strength actually will win, and he will lead Iran. Maybe there will be a leader, but it will be weak. Someone actually will tell him what to do and what is the approach. But we actually see the difference between, you know, the military that's actually pushing into the war, and the more, how would I say, diplomats that actually, yes, they want to talk with the Americans. They want to achieve something in order to stop the war. And there is a clash. There is the power of deterrence that the army wants to go on and make deterrence, although they want Iran to try and to keep the regime alive.
Asaf Cohen, thank you very much indeed.